In this video, you're going to learn how to turn a boring bass line like this into world-class low-end material for a techno track like that. So in this tutorial, I will show you some tools and techniques inside of Ableton Live that are going to surprise you and that will definitely upgrade your workflow. If you are new to this channel, I have a free gift for you. It's called the Finisher Framework, my 3 simple steps that will help you finish at least one great sounding song per month by upgrading your workflow, your creative systems. So this is a massive workflow upgrade that you can get at pickyourself.com/framework. The link is in the description. It's super quick to consume, but will help you a lot. I'm a big fan of having a bass that adds to the groove of the song, and right now the patch that I've programmed here consists of 2 things, and I'm going to show you what this actually does and then how to improve it. So this is what the whole loop sounds like. And now let's solo 2 of the bass tracks here. And you can hear that there is a sub rumble going on and then a super rigid bass line, just like a machine gun playing through. So adding movement to the low end is a bit tricky because on the one hand you don't want to make the bass inconsistent, but on the other hand you still want to add some life to it. So first of all, we're going to treat the sub bass here. So this here is our sub rumble. I've just selected a part of a loop that I found and it sounds like this. And the cool thing is that it is already rhythmic, but it's just very consistent in pitch, and I want to have a little bit more life in here. A cool trick that you can use is to play around with the transposition of the clip on the clip envelope itself. So all you have to do is you close this like little audio toggle and go to the envelope toggle. And here is the clip envelope. And if you go to transposition, this is exactly the pitch that this is originally at. But I can, for example, put this here an octave up and here as well. And now you get this interesting sliding pitch groove. Listen to that. Now, in context, this already sounds much better. Okay, but that's not all. We also have to deal with the top bass layer because this is the most boring thing ever in this track. So this is what the top bass layer sounds like. This is just straight 16th notes playing at A sharp, exactly the same pitch, exactly the same velocity. And this is a very simple operator patch that I've created. Now we're going to completely transform the sound of this bass line without changing any of the bass notes. The first and simplest way of adding a little bit of life to such a stale bass sound is to just create an LFO on top of that. So I'm using the LFO tool here. You can also use Shaper, Box, or whatever you want. And I've dialed in an LFO shape that lets the kick drum come through here at the beginning. And then the bass will come in a little bit louder and then drop off again. So you can hear how much more life this already adds, even if it's such a simple hack. Now let's move on to the next technique. Next up, we're going to use a technique that I know from modular synthesis. I call this patch exploration. And the basic idea here is to allow yourself to experiment a little bit and just map a modulation source to different parameters of a sound source. And there is no right or wrong. You just allow yourself to be freely exploring sound and see what that does. In Ableton Live, it's super easy to do. You just use the LFO tool, for example, as a modulation source, and you map it to different parameters of a sound source. So here, this operator. I went into this exploration and mapped it to time, tone, and 2 of the fine tunings here. There is no right or wrong. There's no reasoning why I did this. I just allowed myself to freely experiment. The only thing that I did intentionally is the rate here. So I set this to a rate that I feel adds to the groove. Listen to that without. As you can hear, it just adds an interesting texture and tone to the bass sound, and I really, really like especially how this interacts with the low end of the sub rumble. Let's listen to that together. Now we're going to use one of the most underrated sources of inspiration in Ableton Live. So many users completely ignore this. I love the MIDI effects inside of Ableton Live. So here you have this MIDI effects tab and you have all these different MIDI notes that you can use. So I'm going to activate my rack here, now deactivate the individual plugins. And the note echo, for example, is something super interesting. So what this does is it takes your existing MIDI material and adds a basically echo to some of the notes depending on what you dial in. Listen to this without and with. So this almost creates a little backbeat behind the original source. You can also pitch this up, for example, make it more interesting, but I keep it relatively subtle here. And by the way, you can route the input to through, which means you are still hearing the original notes, or you mute the original notes and just hear this delayed version. Also super interesting, I love it, but personally, I feel like this is a bit too slow for this type of techno that I'm using. So I'm using the through mode, which means you're hearing the original MIDI notes and then this on top of it. Apart from that, we also have the random tool. Now, the random MIDI note tool here allows you to, by chance, define some notes that are being added, or like pitch that is being added, basically. You can define the scale, and you can decide whether it's pitched up or down. And this just adds one more layer of complexity that I really like. Listen to this without. Now the cool thing is that this also influences obviously the note echo because it comes before this. Yeah, and you can go super crazy. You can add, for example, here different scales and so on. So if you want to get a bit more sci-fi and spacey, that's probably the thing you want to go for. I dialed in a setting that is a little bit more subtle because I still want the bass to be somewhat consistent and have energy in the low end that doesn't get lost with too many crazy changes. Let me now show you the advanced technique that I've promised you in the intro of this video. This is going to blow your mind. I really love this effect. And in case you got something out of this video so far, consider subscribing. This shows me that I'm on the right track, that you find these videos helpful, and it helps me stay motivated to put out new content for you. So I've created a send effect here, and this has a super interesting effects chain. Let's first of all listen to what this does. I'm going to feed my bass into this. So I just wanted to show you how rich the sound is. It's super interesting. And the main thing that I wanted to look at here is this phaser flanger thing in doubler mode. This is sounding so cool. I absolutely love this. If you want a little bit of that psytrance influence, for example, inside of your faster techno tracks, this is kind of the go-to thing that I recommend using in so many of your voices. But there is more to this patch. So first of all, what I did is I shifted everything an octave up. When I bring in the send effect and you have this like phaser flanger doubling thing, it can mess with the phase of your original signal. I want my bass to be stable. I don't want anything in the way of this. So I pitched this up. This is just like a top layer on top of the top bass layer, basically. I spread it out a tiny bit. Then I used an auto filter to filter out some of the low end. And by the way, you can also use an LFO here so that this modulates a little bit. It's very, very nice. And here with the phaser flanger, the cool thing is that you can also, if you change the amount, then these dots start to move around. And you can create even more movement. Let me show this just in solo without the sub bass. Now, I decided against this because I like the super grainy sound when this is still at 0. But if you want a little bit more movement, especially and then to the sides, you can definitely do this. And you can also automate this, of course. So in a setting like this, I really like it a lot. Because you get more of this like flangy sound where everything is just super close and it almost sounds like comp filtering. Really nice. So I will just feed a little bit of this in here. And what I combined this with is I used the hybrid reverb with a little bit of a spring convolution. So springs are characterful, really short reverbs, and a little bit of this prism algorithm. And again, a little bit of LFO tool, exactly the same movement that we had on our original channel, just to make sure that the kick is still cutting through. Now let me show you what this sounds like in context. great little hack for your arrangements later on is if you switch the send to pre-fader, you can bring this fader down, but you will still get all of the send effect here. And you can use this creatively to, for example, create an interesting breakdown where slowly you bring up the original bass sound. You get the idea of this. Now I'm happy to hear from you in the comments what you think of this video. Is there anything you would like to learn from me? Just leave a comment below, ask any questions. I'm super active there, and I will see you in the next video soon.